Well, here we are at the AI Summit in New York, and joining today, I'm happy to say, is Manish from IBM. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You literally just came from the stage.
I did. Yes.
Tell me what you talked about.
So I basically walked through the need for trusted AI. How do you go from practice to, from principles to practice, right? And basically IBM's journey attacking this problem for the last 6 years or so.
So what is trusted AI?
Trusted AI is basically, how do you ensure that anyone using a system that has AI built into it, that is using AI for either making a decision that's going to impact the end user, or that is aiding another human to make a decision, right? How do you ensure that is trustworthy, right? So we got sort of pillars of trust that IBM has defined, right? Is it fair? Is it explainable? Is it, responsible? Is it transparent? And does it protect data privacy of the individual?
So how do you do that?
So it is, you really have to take a look at this sort of in a very holistic manner, right? Because it's not a technology problem, right? I can't give you a tool and say, hey, use this tool and now everything that you do with your AI is going to be trustworthy. It doesn't work that way, right? It's not a technology problem, it's a socio-technology problem, which means you got to deal with people, you got to deal with culture, deal with process and tools, right? And so that is sort of how we look at it within IBM, right? So we started with defining sort of what do we care about, right? From an AI ethics perspective, right? What are our values, our principles, right? We enshrined those. Then we decided, ask sort of the human-centric questions around what would engender somebody to trust decisions made by AI. That's how we came up with those 5 trust principles. Putting that all into practice then requires really, looking at the entire life cycle, right? How do you design? For us, it starts at design. Before you write a line of code or build your machine learning models, right? You got to start at design, right? And really explore the questions around how will the system that you're building impact the end user. And from that, right, from those series of questions, comes out sort of the value that you want to embed into the AI, because the machine has no values, right? That comes from us. And having gone through this process, ensuring that your teams are diverse, that you have an inclusive culture, and this is really important, right? It's not just the traditional, well, I have a diverse team. Yes, but if you don't have a culture where everybody feels comfortable, challenging, and asking, saying, that doesn't work for me because my background and where I grew up, that would be considered really dangerous, or whatever that might be, right? So you understand. So that is sort of the heart of it, right? The culture and the team that you put together. Then you got sort of the design tools that we have built out, right? That each and every one of our teams, either they're building our products, or in my team in IBM Consulting that we're using with our clients, right? We use those tools from a design perspective, from a methodology perspective, and of course there are a whole bunch of true tooling, right, that IBM Research has built, that we've open sourced, that other data and AI platforms have. Putting it all together, right, is what leads to it. And the final piece is around governance, right? Having a true governance process throughout your organization. And this is where IBM again has been at this for 5 or 6 years. Our first ethics board was established in 2015. That was research-led. Since 2018, we've had an enterprise-wide governance AI ethics board that is made up of a really diverse set of individuals from all of the business units, from all of the geographies and the functional groups. Underneath that, we have focal points, which again are a diverse group of people from different geos, from different functions. I am one of the focal points from IBM Consulting, right? And then underneath that, we have a large advocacy network, right? This is sort of a grassroots movement within IBM, right? People who are passionate about AI ethics, right? Who are joining forces, crowdsourcing, coming up with the solutions. All of this flows back into the ethics board. So that's sort of our AI governance model. So these three things, right, are principles around AI ethics, right, our Trustworthy AI, toolkit in terms of best practices, tooling, methodology, right, and AI governance sort of is what is needed, right, to ensure that you have an entire process within the organization and that everything that we do leads to Trustworthy AI.
So are there any aspects of ethics where there's some things that are automated, which IBM obviously automates a lot of things. Is that a different part of where AI plays in terms of trust AI, or is that the same?
So, whether you're automating it or whether you are, assisting a human to make a decision, the principles don't really change, right? Now, clearly there are use cases where you're going to make a choice saying, based on a certain threshold, right? We are fine, if it meets all these criteria, we have designed it well, right? We can automate this without a human review. Other things get kicked off to a human in the loop, right? The human can review it and make a decision. But, the principles don't really change. The methodology that I described shouldn't really change.
So the businesses that you deal with, do they understand this?
Yes and no, right? It really varies. And this is why I think this is a really crucial point, right? Because unlike in other areas, right, where regulations have typically lagged quite a bit, right? That's not the case here, right? And again, I think we are in early days even on regulation, with Europe probably leading in the space. But you don't want to wait for regulations to act, right? I mean, then you're just reacting to what you need to do rather than defining the values that you want to abide by and doing it from that perspective, right?
So we're at an AI event, and clearly there's a rush to AI on the entire marketplace.
Yes.
Are companies stopping enough to think about this?
I think there's enough now in the news and sort of the regulatory noise that yes, right? And this is sort of where, on one hand, AI is everywhere, right? I mean, every decision, that gets made, any critical workflow that you look at, right? Whether it's hiring, compensation, the rate that you get on your mortgage or a loan, right? All have AI, models either making the decision or assisting somebody make the decision. The question is now, right, there's a set of folks who are just end users, have no idea about AI. They seem very trusting about AI. Well, the machine made it, machines are infallible, so it must be right? While you have enough examples on the other side saying, whoa, right, there's so much bias, there's so many things that are wrong in the way this is working. So I think there's increasing level of awareness. The regulatory frameworks that are starting to be put out, right, puts the legal folks in any large organization say, pause, all right? And what happens because of that is many times, projects that they are experimenting with, that they want to put out, suddenly gets paused saying, how are we going to assure that the decisions made by AI are going to be trusted, right? So a lot of stuff then gets paused and doesn't go into production, doesn't go into generating value for organizations. And that's really the opportunity, because I still believe that there's tremendous opportunity for AI to benefit society, right? For new products, new services, new experiences for all of us. But that will only happen if society can trust AI, right? And that's why this is such a critical discussion that all of us are having.
So if it's built in, if Trustworthy AI is built in at the design level, do you still have to watch it all the way through?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no checklist, right? I mean, people always want to think, well, give me the checklist. I did design, I did this, and it should be now fine. That's just not how it works, right? So and that is why sort of the governance, the systematic governance process is so important, right? We had our monthly ethics board meeting yesterday, right? And we discussed sort of everything that we have achieved this year, what we want to do, right? I mean, the journey is not over, right? There's constant tweaking that can be done. There's constant use cases from the field that come up for the ethics board to review. and decide upon saying, should we do this, right? What are the ethical implications of it, right? How should we do it? So it's never done. I mean, I don't think you can just automate that.
So do any businesses approach you and say, we have some AI, would you come and check it for us, please?
So that's an interesting question. We are a sponsor of the Responsible AI Institute, and there's an effort to say, can I get a certification, right? I mean, this building has a LEED certification, right? Can I certify this particular AI for this particular use case? I think that is a reasonable thing to pursue, but it's got to be very narrow, right? I mean, I cannot certify the AI for any use case. Okay, you're doing a very specific thing. You can go through and evaluate it, right, and give a level of certification.
But only
right?
for that moment.
Exactly, right? So, how long does that certificate last, right? Is it every year you got to go back for an audit, right? And say, okay, are you still doing everything that you told me and showed me that you were doing last year, right? Have you continued to do it, right? What's the proof point for that, etc. So it's going to be a very interesting space. Lots of ideas, good ideas being thrown out, right? And that's what we need.
So a year from now, we're sitting here having this conversation. What will we be talking about?
I think there will be advancements in sort of the discussion around regulations, right? Because right now it seems a bit haphazard, right? Cities and states are putting out saying, this is allowed and this is not allowed. That's going to get crazy, right? I mean, you can do it in New York, you can do it in California, right? But you can't do it in Illinois. So what do we do at the national level? What do you do at the state level, right? What are industries, and corporations going to do? How does all this tie out together, right? I mean, Europe typically sort of takes a lead compared to the US usually on these topics, right? So what are they going to put out, right? And how do these sort of different geographies and countries, how does a company like IBM operate across all of this? So it's going to be a very interesting space. I think there will be advancements in it, both from a technology, standardization perspective. Frameworks will be put out and adopted. So I'm just positive about it.
Well, I look forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for having me.